two things ran parallel, both from the side of the visual literacy of it. My father's a brilliant cinematographer as well, and his footage is really beautiful, and so I had those sides coming at me, and yeah, I just had no choice.
Okay, and yes, so that must have been very interesting. Maybe if you're willing to share the context of growing up, you know, where exactly you were growing up, because we've got international guests as well, so maybe if you could just frame that because I think where we're located speaks a lot to who we are and how we understand the world and interact with it.
So I grew up in Victoria, very conservative. I went to very conservative white Australian schools. I was in a kind of, I don't know what they call it, but I think there's a saying that is used, hypernormality, that kind of situation. If I look back, Adam, what's his name, the documentary filmmaker, you know, he speaks about that. And I feel like when I watched his film, I felt like that's actually what it was like for me. Going to school, not being able to speak to my friends, and not making any friends of a deeper nature, that my friends were basically superficial, because I couldn't share anything, even though we weren't highly political. The fact that there was things happening in our houses which wasn't necessarily okay with the status quo, could have been broadcasted and there would have been repercussions. So that was a constant throughout my high school. I've never met again any friends from high school ever. The separation, I never made deep friendships with people. And only after that, when I started to meet people outside of those spaces who were doing work which was clinical cinemas, as well as the limitations of a racial issue. You couldn't watch films with other people other than white people, so that was the limitation. So he opened the cinema which was based on, and as I said, it showed anything from Ingmar Bergman to all kinds of films that would not be seen on the circuit. And so I got into that, and the way he did it was to get past the norms is you just had to become a member. So your ticket was you just had to become a member. So your ticket was becoming a member of this group, you know, and so in that way sort of managed to circumvent the laws that were in place. And then that was also the sound studio, so he recorded, he did sound mixing during the day, and then it was cinema on the weekends and some evenings, and so there were lots of things happening in the cinema as well beyond, as a sound studio. And then there were other people coming in to make films. You would have, you know, people from overseas who were making films in South Africa, who would use that as a base and use his facilities and that kind of thing. So there was always other influences coming into the space as well, which was always fascinating to me as well. And then change the film, you know, black bag, you know, those kinds of things were all wonderful.
Fantastic.
Learn how to operate the projectors, and you know, yeah.
You're wonderful.
It's a paradiso in a way in Victoria.
Oh, fantastic. Just a quick digression. Yolo, this person that wants to come in, can I admit them?
Yes.
Thank you. I can't read, sorry, I don't know. Gitonga. I don't have my glasses, sorry. Well, I do have them. There we go. Okay. So what's very interesting, what you were saying about the cinema space, and Gitonga, welcome. Perhaps if you could mute and switch your camera off, please. Gitonga, can you hear me? We've lost. Okay. What's very interesting for me is how you speak about the cinema space, and how Teddy was speaking about the cinema space in terms of on Monday, and how this interaction with this idea of access and who could go to the cinema and what it meant, and this kind of interest in terms of this medium. So Angie, I'll divert to you. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about growing up, what sparked your interest in film, and how you know, what sparked your thoughts?
So, I mean, you know, when I hear people say that from the age of 3, I thought I was going to be a filmmaker, I never take that very seriously, but I do take it seriously with Catherine, because probably that was the environment in which she did grow up. And I just want to point to the fact that Catherine, and I think that's so fascinating, kind of grew up with sound, really. I mean, sound was her first place of editing, and I'm always interested in the sonic, you know, and the danger of the sonic and the way that it can, you know, make us depart. And I think it's really the imaginary the imaginary spaces of cinema that are important to me. But I came to film through stories. I came to film through literature, through childhood stories. So I would say literature was my first love. And then later, in my later teens, when I became not apartheid activist, but feminist activist in my work, then I found a marriage between the kind of the social significance of film. And so when I started my kind of life in film, I was at Community Video Education Trust in Cape Town. And that was an organization known for circulating banned works and so on. So there's always been this kind of a marriage. But I, you know, and then I also studied film proper in terms of film studies and so on. And so I loved the escape of story, you know. And I was just talking to my partner about, you know, Cervantes the other day, and the way in which these episodic, the story, how episodes unfold, and, you know, how are we working with that here, and in which ways we are perhaps doing that in our telenovelas and not, you know, and because we don't have a particular kind of consciousness around the depth of that kind of that storytelling. I'm not sure. Anyway, but also because we lived. My stepfather was a Finnish diplomat, and my mother was South African, and so we lived all over the world. And kind of, you know, the things that I remember is when we were in Lagos, I think it was about 7 or something like that, and going to see, thank you, and going to see, now I'm going to say, similar to Teddy, Clint Eastwood, except for I didn't see Clint Eastwood as a Zulu hero that later manifests as a white male, but rather it was at the American Club. It was on Ikoyi Island, and I remember just that going into the night, and it was a drive-in cinema, you know, that kind of thing. So it was a whole thing around the space of the cinema as this imaginary escape, and I think I still hang on to that. I do like the social activist aspects, but I think I cannot also let go of the Bergman. You know, I cannot let go of the mirror and the way that film carries us into parts of ourselves, our psyche, our imagination, our subconscious, and so on. So I think that's. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah.
But I do want to, before you continue, because Catherine and I then intersect in a very interesting way later. So I was running the Joburg Film Festival, and so Catherine doesn't just want to come and show Dying for Gold. She and Richard Peklapa, her partner, were a pain in the ass because they kept on saying that they they wanted to bring their entire panel, and then they wanted the media there. And I mean, I can't even tell you, like running that festival, the wheels felt like they were coming off all the time. So I'm like, Catherine, really? And she was constantly on the phone with me, constantly organizing. Anyway, you'll talk about that experience. Yes. We finally managed to pull it off. And then, you know, that was one permutation of what I do. And then about a year later, I'm sitting in Khalid's living room in Muizenberg, and we're at a dead end because we don't have anybody to shoot our feature film. And we're sitting there, and Demir was saying, okay, I'll shoot it myself. My husband, my partner, was saying, okay, I'll shoot it myself at this juncture because it was NFAF money and we had to finish. So he's like, I'm going to shoot it. And then Richard Peklapa walks in with your grandchild, Catherine, on the bicycle, you know, and walks into the living room and sits down, and he's like, you know, we're sitting there having tea together. He's like, so what's the problem? And I remember these extraordinary, again, these scenes, these lyrical scenes, and I know it's not a lyrical space, but underground in the mines with those lanterns and how beautifully shot they were, which was, they were just using the practical lights of the helmets of the miners and these wandering lanterns. And I'm looking at Richard, I'm thinking, would he dare? Would he think about it? And I said, would you shoot the film? Because we knew we didn't want lots of lights. We wanted a very kind of small crew, and we wanted to work with practical lighting. And Richard said, absolutely. And that's how we ended up making Down So Long, which seems to me like a companion film to Dying for Gold.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a perfect intersection, because that was what I'd like to get into now, is the two, the films, the types of films that you both make. And the first thing is that Dying for Gold, and I'd like to speak about Dying for Gold because our students in second year actually, Catherine, you're aware of it, that Teddy and I teach Dying for Gold, so they're familiar with it. But what's very interesting, and again, it's about these intersections, you work in that film on documentary, you work with a community, you go in with a community. In Down So Long, it's a fiction, but you also go into working with a community. And yes, it was a 5-year project. Dying for Gold was also quite a lengthy project. Sorry, I'm going to try admit Gitonga again. And then Gitonga, could you please mute and turn your camera off? I don't know if you can hear me. I think it's, yeah, he's muted. Hello, welcome. And if you turn your camera off as well, please. Thank you. Okay, so perhaps you can tell us a little bit about Dying for Gold and how you got access into the community, because there's also, there's a certain trust that's built when filmmakers go into communities. There's also the ethics question, and perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about that film, and then we'll talk about it from a fiction perspective, particularly from a documentary perspective. Have we lost Catherine's back?
Catherine, can you hear?
Catherine, did you hear? Could you hear me?
No, I don't think she can.
Catherine?
Maybe just something to do with.
What does it say?
She might have muted this. Put in a chat for her.
Catherine, can you hear me?
Catherine, can you hear?
Can you hear us? I'm just going to will you hold this? I'm just going to open the chat.
Can you hear me?
Gitonga, we can hear you. Catherine, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. Did you hear my question about Dying for Gold?
I think there's I think they disconnected somehow.
It's muted.
Yes.
Gitonga's muted.
There seems to be an issue with the connection in Johannesburg.
Okay.
That's what you said.
Does anyone know who's entered this conversation? Because Gitonga's muted.
Yeah, I think it's in Johannesburg that's the problem.
Okay. Now, I was joining so that I can follow what is happening. The presentation is 3 from 3. That's why my presentation is later. Supposed to present on Monday.
Anyone know who's talking?
But due to those issues, network issues, so I cannot present. So I'll be presenting today.
It's wrong. The wrong guest, the wrong time.
00 hours.
It's not this person.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Sorry, we just...
I'm not going to organize this, so I can't help you with that.
No, don't worry, we've got Hanky, who's definitely far more tech savvy than any of us. We just don't know who the person is who's speaking.
So let me explain. James,
Hi, can you hear me?
is a paid member of CARA.
But he's muted. He's muted.
Somebody else
I
entirely.
think we need to actually
Can we
evict
maybe-
him because he seems to think he should be coming
Maybe
on
we
now.
can-
But he's muted.
It's not him,
So he's
somebody
muted.
else
It's not
entirely.
Gitonga.
Okay.
You want to get her on the phone, maybe?
No. Let's.
Maybe we just
How you
close
guys
it
gonna-
and then
you just
open
put
it
it on
again.
speaker,
It might-
right?
To leave it. To leave. Catherine, we're going to try and leave the meeting and rejoin.
We can put her on the speakerphone as well.
Yes.
Which is probably, then you know what she looks like. Yeah, put her on the speakerphone.
Okay.
She wanted to show a few things.
Yeah, she did want to show.
Maybe we can just restart the
we-
Teams meeting. Just
Just hold on. I got the. Just wait. Just let me find.
Okay, so I've just muted everyone.
Okay, I've left. I'm just gonna. Sorry. I'm just trying to get the link again. Would it be here? Let me see if it, because I didn't get a camera invite now. It came via.
we've
There we
just
go. Just wait, I'm
disconnected
just. Oh, okay.
as we set the thing up. Yeah.
I'm just looking for the meeting invite. Okay, let's just find your. There we go.
What time is our session over?
10. But we started at 20 past, so I think if we go over 10 minutes, it's okay. I think it's the Wi-Fi in this room.
And James has left, so I think that's a problem.
It could be someone, because apparently this was the link from yesterday. It could be someone that had joined in,
Sounds like.
but they weren't on the. They weren't on the meeting. So I'm not sure. I don't know. Otherwise, we'll join with my phone.
Yeah. Maybe for the sake of expediency.
Yeah, I think it might be. Yeah, faster and easier.
Because it's just that she wanted to show some. But we've got 15 minutes left. She's not even going to get a chance to do that. We just started the conversation. Everyone can hear me, right?
Let's see.
Is that Catherine?
This works.
Okay.
It's on now.
Okay, just put her on speaker, yeah. That's the best way. She won't have time to do her propaganda thing. She'll have to do it when she comes to you guys for her master's.
Maybe we can.
We'll give us a special session.
Yeah.
You know,
She's not on WhatsApp.
Is she not? Do you want me to message her? Should
She
be on
phoned
WhatsApp.
me.
She should be. She's just here in Neisner. It's not like she's in Australia. We can.
Do you think anything could work better? Because it's not people anymore. I think it's the virus.
And about being a documentary filmmaker and the process of going into a community, gaining trust, dealing with ethical issues in terms of vulnerability, in terms of anonymity and confidentiality. Maybe you could tell us just a little bit about that process and how you work within that format of documentary filmmaking.
But also how she found that specific community, right? That's
Yes,
the
and
first
how you found, yeah, my first question was also how you found the community. Thank you.
Okay, so, I mean, Dying for Gold we shot across many countries and in many communities. So in each case it was a process of going through different community organizations, ex-mine organizations, community groups, that kind of process, and people who were already involved with ex-miners who had been exposed to silicosis and tuberculosis. So we had already a kind of pre-selection in a way as to who we would, how we would get to them. So, for example, in Lesotho, there's an organization called the Mine Workers Development Agency, and they work throughout Lesotho with ex-miners and their families and dependents. And they are largely ex-miners themselves, and as an organization. Originally came out of the National Union of Mine Workers, who set them up. And so that was in Lesotho. And then because the people that they were really close to in Lesotho across, they trusted them. So because we were being introduced to them through the Mine Workers Development Agency, the ex-miners and their families already had a certain amount of trust in us because of the introduction. And then we would spend a lot of time with each family, and we were working with families as opposed to individuals. And so we would speak to the whole family normally, even sometimes the children, and interview everyone. And introduce the idea was, this, first of all, that there were very few people who knew what was going on, what was happening to ex-miners, that silicosis, that they were taking it home with them. So there are various levels of how people get to know what it is that they have. Tuberculosis, they largely understood. But silicosis, because it wasn't curable, or isn't curable, sometimes would become part of some mythological reason as to why they have this disease, or they've been they get the disease because they were bad or they did something bad or whatever it is. And a lot of it was about educating people also about the silicosis is not your fault. This is how it happened. This is why you have this disease, and this is why you're in the situation you're in, and this is what's going to happen to you. So we wanted to be very straight down the line and give them as much information as we had access to about their diseases, because they had not been told. They had a disease they knew nothing about, and no one actually sat them down and said, this is what you've got, this is why you have it, and this is what you can expect. Can you imagine if you have cancer and nobody's actually told you anything? They've actually gone out of their way not to tell you anything and not to give you any information or any understanding of how you can support yourself or what is coming your way further down the line. So part of it was that. Then now there are many who are ill, and once they understood what was going on, the need to share that with their families and the world, in a sense, started to become more apparent. Workers is that we have so much, art, music, poetry that talks about this, the veils that people have to kind of put on to separate themselves from the different layers of their lives. So once they leave their rural spaces, the travel into another country in some cases, into South Africa, and then into the mines and urban spaces and underground. So there are several layers, and they don't always talk to one another. It becomes quite sort of, it becomes a sort of compartmentalizing of your life. When you are underground, this is the kind of person you are. When you're above ground and you've had your shower and you've cleaned up and you've put on your suit, you become that person. And that person doesn't really talk to the person who works underground. And then that urbanite person doesn't speak to the rural person either, or the life of the family. Then you are someone else when you live with your family back home in Lesotho or in Eastern Cape or somewhere else. And that was clear across all the regions, whether it was Mozambique or Lesotho, Eastern Cape, Maybe a little less so in the Free State, because there you are living in the urban environment or semi-urban environment. So there it was a little bit different. But everywhere else there was that sense that there was a schizophrenia to how you lived. And I mean, that reflects also the apartheid compartmentalizing of your life, you know, to survive, you know. Not having a job, having a job, not having the right to live here and not to live there. All of those things, the lies that were required to survive those spaces. So that continues even today in a way. And to the point that many of them, and this is also extraordinary to us, that would say, we will speak to you because we can't tell our families what we went through. We want you to tell them through this film. And that was another extraordinary thing, that they, even at that point, they weren't, because we were asking them the life questions, you know, where were you when your first child was born? At which point did you see your first child? Knowing that most men would not have seen their child probably at birth, and probably if their contract was 2 years, it could be up to 2 years before they saw their first child, their firstborn. And if you think of your firstborn and what a huge impact that has on your life, it felt like that is that moment. That one of the questions we would ask all the participants about that. The idea to, you know, that whole thing of migrant labourers and how they are separated from their families and how it emasculates them in their lives, both in their family lives as well as where they're living, and then all the ramifications of that. So yeah, that just broadly.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Angie, maybe you'd like to tell us about your journey without so long, because that was also about gaining trust within a community, very much about gaining trust within a community, and because you got a lot from the community. It was a fiction film as opposed to documentary, but yet it was very much about the community's voice. So maybe you'd like to speak a little bit about that, because you also, I mean, both of you also work across the boundaries, you know, you blur the boundaries of documentary and fiction filmmaking. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Look, it was a fairly delicate engagement, I have to say that. And I think, you know, when I think about what documentary proper is demanding of us from, you know, and I think that's where, in a sense, Catherine and Richard are unusual documentary filmmakers. I do have to say this because they basically didn't leave finish the film and walk away from the community. They have continued to work with the community. They've been involved in the class action suit. They have found, it's been years now, of working also as I don't know if it's officially an NGO, but certainly the campaign to keeping silicosis on the radar and what is happening with the miners. But I also knew that when we were going to do Down So Long, that was not something that I would be able to sustain, you know, from a kind of a documentarian, and Catherine and I have talked about that documentarian point of view. So in a sense, I thought that the fiction would almost shield me, because it would be this kind of fictional story, and we could set it in Hamburg, which was in Hout Bay in Cape Town. And we discovered that community because we had actually been the kind of homage or intertextual film for Down So Long was Bruti Smoky Ekativi by Ettore Scola. And the opening shot is one in the original of kind of the rich Rome, and then the townships that are kind of on the periphery. So we were looking for that single shot, and we were told by a journalist friend, you know, why don't you go and have a look at this place? So we went through and immediately met like these community leaders and so on and so forth. But it's, as we know, these communities are highly factionalized. You have all kinds of people within them who are surviving from abalone poachers to gangsters to just everyone working really and just kind of getting by. So we had to figure out how to navigate that. And we were lucky enough to have the assistance of a peace mediator because there was a lot of kind of social tumult that was happening at the time. This community had basically so-called encroached into the nature reserves and essentially the Western Cape government was quite hardcore in dealing with them and had brought in the police and so on. So we were documenting some of that and gave that documentation actually to Dylan Valley, who with Aryan Kaganov made a little film about it. Anyway, so we were kind of on that journey. So it really became this journey of getting into their lives and over 5 years writing the script, which was a fiction, but always reading it back through the community and getting it was almost like an archaeological excavation where we just kept on enriching the script, but still maintaining its separation. That was important to us, that we wouldn't become so earnest. And because we were working with comedy, that was going to be hard too. And the idea, always to kind of create a distanciation that didn't allow for stereotyping and also allow for a kind of objective lens and camera that would be fun, that we would rather have these kind of tableaus of life. And we wanted to have people in their kind of full boisterousness, that they were full of the love of life and the fun of life, and within the context of this extremely difficult environment. So that's really what I think we were trying to engage with. So it is a social comment film, but we cast it in a really fun way. And then we had, of course, the community acting in it and also doing all the servicing of the film in terms of the catering. And we, because it was a factionalized community, we actually brought the gangsters in to pay our security. And so it made sense. They were fantastic. And then we had it was like gendered in that sense, with the women doing the this and the Rastas doing that. And so the behind the scenes of it was fascinating, and because it's a duplication of the story of this mother and father who are at odds with one another over this insurance money, the supposed insurance money that he gets because he's lost his eye in this fishing accident. That's how we transposed it. That that they would actually then be so strangely, Tamir and I became because I worked with my husband at this depiction on the other side of the camera of the mother and the father. So I was like running this crew and he was running that crew. Anyway, it was an extraordinary month, but it was 5 years in the making because we were involved in helping to set up the Khoisan. They want to set up a Khoisan center. Then it's this or then it's that. You know how it is, Catherine. But I think that I always wrestle with the question of ethics and the relationship to community. That can you walk away? And I did ask Catherine that because I felt that I myself could not sustain. We tried different things. We tried to say, okay, can we get this turned into a TV series? Can we do this? Can we do that? We didn't have any takers. The film went to Showmax and showed on Showmax. Not sure how popular it was. I don't know much about the AI and the algorithms, but it lasted a little while. To what extent, and I think if you don't mind my asking and bringing it up because it's such an important thing, how does one continue to live with it, because it then becomes something that it's that power, the power issue as a filmmaker that you actually carry into the space, that you are representing somebody who's more vulnerable. And then, that I don't think that situation ever gets equalized myself. But I do think that what you guys have done is find a way to broaden it and almost reconfigure the film that becomes a part of the broader conversation, rather than it being the broader conversation, if you know what I mean, Catherine. So
I'm always interested. I asked her, when are you going to, can you ever go to sleep and not continue with this? And she said she can't. And I think that's really, that's dangerous and that's brave.
Thank you. Yeah, that is very interesting, and it's wonderful to hear behind the scenes how you included the community in the making of the film. My next question is about, and you both identify as women and as females, so the question is about how do you navigate the filmmaking space in South Africa as women and navigate societies and communities that are sometimes very hierarchically placed, and how does one locate oneself within that? Catherine, I don't know if you'd like to go first.
Wow.
I can speak on Catherine's behalf. It might be easier.
It's the most difficult thing, it really is, because especially in Dying for Gold, you're walking to largely, I don't know how to, very patriarchal systems in the family, in the communities, and on the one side it is quite, you can't not step into that space. You walk into a space and all the men are sitting on chairs, all the women are sitting on the ground, and you go join the women on the ground, as much as you're an outsider and they say, no, you must sit on the chair, because you're special, and you say, no, I will sit with you. But it's a little bit like that part, and then also knowing that once you've spoken to the wives, you don't know what happens when you leave the room. So although they have chosen and they say yes, they're ready to speak and they want to speak, that's not enough. That when you leave that room, whatever they've said will more than likely have repercussions, especially and one example I'll give you is it was a second wife who was brought in controversial ways into the family after the first wife was ill and then died, and the second wife was literally brought in to look after the family with the children. She's much younger than the husband, and so we asked her if she would be interested, if she would like to tell the story, and she said yes. She's speaking Portuguese and Shanga, Shopi, it was in Mozambique. And her husband sat next to her on the right-hand side. He's out of frame on the right-hand side, and she's looking directly at me, and the translator sitting in front of me. I'm like literally right behind, having the translator from the back in the way. And so this is the dialogue. And the opening question is, can you tell us something about what is it like to live with a minor, and can you give a sense? And she's quiet, totally quiet, just sits there. And after like a minute or two, I'm thinking maybe she didn't get the question or whatever. And then her face starts to change and she just starts to cry. And she just says, it's so hard. It's just so hard. My life is hard. And I have no choice. I have no right. I have nothing. And it was devastating. And you have to walk out of that house. And you can feel his eyes bearing on her. And she's just holding our gaze all the time, knowing what's going to come at her when we leave the room, leave the homestead. So in those kinds of circumstances, it's completely devastating, and you are powerless to intervene. It is her agency to make that choice to speak to us, and she knew what she was doing. But we also know that what she's exposed herself to probably when we leave the room. So those kinds of moments, and I think for myself as a woman, I've negotiated that all my life as being a woman in these male-orientated spaces. All the spaces I've been in were male-orientated up to when I was first as an assistant editor to Renelle Lewis, and finally I was assisting a woman. I don't remember any woman directors at that point other than Katinka Haynes. There were very few women in any other positions. Continuity was normally a woman, and normally she was treated like a second grade secretary kind of position, even though her position was so fundamentally important. So it was a process of etching away and scratching away this male-dominated spaces, and one gets, now it's really, for me now, in those spaces, to see the progress is just so fulfilling. To see women, to see Angie in front of me, to see you in front of me, to see all the young women coming through as cinematographers, recording sound, bringing them, it's just the most glorious thing for me to see that happening in front of my eyes, in my lifetime, to see this massive change. It is a massive change, and we still have a long way to go, for sure, but there is a big change that has happened, and I'm hugely grateful and of the courage of all these young women coming into space.
Okay. Angie, if you'd like to give your experience or feedback.
It's so interesting because I do find that I'm not sure I would cast it in those terms. I find patriarchy interesting, and the ways in which it situates all of us. So I think that I'm a very good student of it. And in terms of writing character, that's how I exercise my thoughts around it, and also the kind of agency I feel. And with Down So Long in particular, it was it's interesting. The film kind of turns midway through where the matriarch seizes the power in the story, and it was purposeful. So and to for example work with a kind of a very strong woman character who is the daughter-in-law, and the mother is sending her, and her mother-in-law is sending her out to solicit services. And so kind of like dealing with what women have to deal with, but at the same time showing them in a very kind of a powerful sense, right? I won't say powerful in that way, but there's a sense of serious agency. So I love writing. I love writing male characters in particular, I think, because I can exercise a lot of my feminist perspective through that, like pushing the edge. And I think that's why I like comedy, and I like if I could really take it, like the next project we're working on is very, very dark comedy. So it's it's five generations of undertakers, and it's an Afrikaans story. I'll explain why later, but anyway, and it's five generations of undertakers, and all the women die, when they give birth to these sons. So already there's a comment there, and so it's all about this life of men and so on. So I think it gives me lots of imagination. I feel very kind of Trojan horsey and enabled by my positionality as a woman, to be honest. And I do have lots of fun, but I can. But that is not to say that I'm not cognizant. I'm very cognizant of what women do. We do face. It's the hardness of it. But perhaps that's exactly what gives them, again, that idea, how then do we take that and go into the imagination, and how do we start to almost create stories where almost we should be, rather than only where we are or might find ourselves to be. That answers.
Yeah, thank you. I know that we're running a little bit over time, but can I ask maybe if we just open the floor for 1 or 2 questions? And if anyone would like tea or coffee, to please help yourself, because I think it's a very unique opportunity to speak to people who have this kind of experience. So, Catherine, if you're okay with that, if I could open it up. Thank you. So if anyone has 1 or 2 questions, thanks. I'm going to turn. Can she see?
Hello, Catherine and Angie. I just wanted to actually just give a quick comment, because we've been talking about representation a lot at this conference, and I interviewed Angie at the Silver Scarabæus in August, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, about her movie, and broadcasted at freelance for the SABC station here, which has about 1 million Afrikaans listeners across the country. And a very, about 70% of our listeners come from a so-called coloured community. And when I was driving back to the airport, the driver of a bus asked me, "Oh, were you at this film festival?" "Yes, I heard in this radio program about this movie about Hamburg, and all my family that lives there listened to it, and they were so proud that they represented in this film." So I just wanted to say, even though you say you don't know how popular the film was, you know, people just hearing that they were represented on film were so proud of it, and like really told each other. And so I think it's just, sometimes even though people don't necessarily see our films, just for being represented on film means so much to them. So I just wanted to give you that feedback. And then also, as an Afrikaans speaker, your movie is in Afrikaans, and I must say, for a movie that was directed by non-Afrikaans speakers, it's the most natural dialogue in film I've heard in a long time, so I just wanted to give you that.
Thank you. It's probably because we don't. It's not stilted.
Yes.
Can I answer to that?
Yes.
So I just want to talk a little bit. It's wonderful that you. Yeah, I'm going to have to. I'm used to it. That's what I teach. Thank you so much for noting it. And I mean, part of what we did is, you know, it was also the workshop style of how we shot. So we only started shooting. We knew we had, and Catherine, I hope you can hear. You know, Richard was amazing, because we told him we just want to do single, you know, these long takes. So we had lots of choreography to organize. So we would kind of spend, and we knew we wouldn't get people to set before 10 o'clock. It's not going to happen. So we would do these choreography in the morning, and then we would start shooting about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And by that time, people had kind of, we'd give them the scene, that, because we wanted it to be naturalistic. So we give the scene in the morning. We tell them they knew what the story was about, but we tell them this is what's happening and so on. And then in their own language, they would infuse, you know. But I knew enough, by the way, to pick up on, is this going erroneously? Is somebody hijacking the scene for their own purposes? But it did, they were wonderful. I mean, I think they were the best actors, actually. And you know, I mean, we had the whole crew and cast at Silver Scale. And that was quite an amazing moment for them. But, you know, you always want to know then, and then what? You know, what's the import of it, and what's going to be the aftermath for them? We will go, our film will go on Showmax, but them, it doesn't change the conditions of their lives. And I think that's my discomfiture with the situation. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, ladies. It's very inspiring to hear how you come into the industry and what you've done. But my question is about, in terms of after docu support. Catherine, you mentioned that after you go into these communities, that there's so many things that you are not able to do, but you see that something's going to happen with, like when you mentioned with the wife and the husband. So I wanted to ask, especially in terms of docu, what after docu support do you have, or what can be encouraged to assist these communities after we've done the story, just so that we help them, because sometimes the repercussion of what we are doing and telling their story is much bigger for them, especially. So how can we assist them in terms of after docu support, after telling the story and the repercussions that follow them after the story has been done?
Catherine, would you like to respond?
Okay, I'll try. I mean, in our case, It's a very particular case, so I can't speak for other kinds of films, and I don't, it won't necessarily apply to all films. Because we had made the film at the time of the silicosis class action suit, which was settled out of court, we felt at the end of 2019, the film was launched in 2018, end of 2018, beginning 2019. And we started a campaign at the end of 2019 where we brought 19 different organizations across the region together into a forum called the Justice for Minors Forum. And since then, we have now formed a NGO, and basically the NGO's main function really is to hold the compensation systems accountable. So there's statutory compensation for ex-minors for diseases, occupational diseases, and then there's the trust that was formed out of the class action settlement called the CILECT Trust, which will only be around for 12 years, and they're already in their going fifth year. So that's the work that we do, and we have chapters across the region, one in Botswana, one in Lesotho, one in Eastern Cape, and one in Free State. And the chapters help with information sharing for the ex-minor communities of how they can apply for compensation. We support them for any, if they are needing any help, information on that process, both for the Senior Trust as well as the government statutory compensation. And at the same time, we're busy in the process of collecting evidence of failure on the part of the compensation system to in fact do the work that they're supposed to do, which we will then take further. So that's the work that we do. Our belief is that if we can get the compensation into these communities, if they get the lump sum amounts or monthly amounts that would come from compensation, they would be able to change their lives in the way that they choose. And so that's one way, that's what we're driving for. Beyond that, there's not much one can do. Documentaries are not a profit-making venture in most cases, or at least definitely in our case. So we support, we use the influence of the film to inform people to get the funding to run this organization, use the film clips. It gets shown across the region in community screenings, which also helps start discussions around it. It includes the information around silicosis and TB, and we are able to support communities in that way. So, that's some of the ways that we work.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we actually have run out of time. We could have carried on for the right till lunch. But thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Catherine, thank you. Angie, thank you for stepping in. It was a lovely conversation. Thank you so much. Whoops. Okay.